سبيل الدموع سبيل مريح تنهدى يا صاحي كي تستريح وبث الدعاء الخفي الصريح.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome to our two-part series. Part two, which is, let me tell you what the two-part series is first before I get ahead of myself, which is evolution, devolution, or devolution. And this is part two, and part two is evolution never hurt nobody. All it does is make things better. Okay. All it does is make things better, because at the end of the day, that's what evolution claims it does. And it's just my usual tongue-in-cheek type of titles just to get things a little bit exciting. Okay, let's move on. Now, if you recall from part one, and before we go into what the Quran says about evolution theory, because that's our focus today, is that where does Islam or Islamic principles now stand with respect to the evolution theory? We've scientifically dealt with it, but we want to get a theological position with respect to it. Well, first we need a little bit of a recap. And in terms of a recap, what we need to be thinking about is, first of all, this common descent, meaning a common ancestor, which was the common ancestor for the particular type of species, but also a common ancestor full stop, from which all other creatures evolved. Secondly, there is this concept of random mutations, and the random mutations here are the by chance mutation taking place, which obviously Charles Darwin would not have been aware of, but within the DNA, which brings about a beneficial change. And this beneficial change then, another mutation brings out a beneficial change which builds on the original one. So they are progressive and in series. And obviously we talked in great detail about this concept of random mutations in last part, in which, it's ridiculous. We even talked about this common descent as well, about the creature. Just because there are similarities between creatures does not mean that they had a common ancestor. At the end of the day, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is making a bird. So if he's making a bird, then at the end of the definition, a bird is going to have some kind of beak, it's going to have a head, it's going to have wings, and it's going to have a body, and it's going to have kind of legs, and it's going to have feathers. That's, a broad, and it's going to lay eggs. So that's kind of broad definition of a bird. Now, we know on the earth, I'm not going to go around and counting how many birds there are, but species of birds, but there will be thousands of species of birds. So when you think about it, someone asks you to draw a bird on a piece of paper, you might draw a few, and then that's it. You stop. Even if they said, look, just use your imagination. Use your imagination. Don't get stupid, but use your imagination and imagine that, these 5-6 things that I gave as an identifier: a beak, wings, legs, feathers, a body, a head, and a tail. And if I gave you these and I said, right, now you got those, now go on, draw as many birds as you can, or types of birds as you can, at best, even those of us who have, got a vivid imagination, we will draw 50, 100. There's 30, 40 subspecies within a particular bird. So, so to say, that means that there was a particular type of bird from which all these evolved is a ridiculous statement to make. And random mutations is likewise, as we've already described. Finally, this concept of natural selection, whereby the fitter, the stronger survives. And because the stronger survives, it survives due to a mutation. And when it survives due to this mutation, it produces more offspring. And as a result, because it's producing more offspring, then the creature changes into another species. And therefore, all creatures have come about by chance. There is no creator. That's a clear evolution theory. Let's not misunderstand this. The evolution theory is, as a matter of fact, saying that a random creature came about, and then following on from him or it or her, other mutations took place, which were also random, which led to other species developing, and then those species lived and some died out due to natural selection. There is no involvement of a creator whatsoever. There is no involvement for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala whatsoever. Therefore, a human is no different as a chance mutant than all other creatures. That's important to understand, because what we sometimes do, is we're quite happy to discuss the evolution theory when we're talking about other creatures and other species. but it gets a little bit uncomfortable when we start talking about humans. And the reason for that is because this was used in a very negative way. It was used within social Darwinism and also within the eugenics program in the Nazi Germany. And this was used, the evolution theory was used to explain certain things. And I don't want to preempt those slides. And I'll say it now, and I will say it before those slides come up, that I'm only using these slides to explain. I do not support the way these slides are presenting themselves in terms of the language they're using. I do not support them whatsoever. But in order to illustrate what I'm talking to you about, I have little choice but to use them. So I want to set that out right now, that this is not my aim is to offend anybody. It's not to degrade anybody. In fact, you will see what my position is as we describe it from the verses of the Quran. But it's just to make this point, because people forget then that humans must also have been evolved through this process. Well, the neo-Darwinists and the new atheists absolutely categorically agree. But you'll see in the later slides, Muslims now, as have Christians in the past and possibly Jews as well, are now saying that, wait a minute, what if the evolution theory was something which Allah used to bring about humans? So I'm going to tackle that from that perspective, but I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. So therefore, as we've already explained in part 1, if we accept this common descent, we accept these random mutations, we accept this concept of natural selection, then the human has no special role. He is no different than a chance mutant than all the other creatures. That is just survival of the fittest. He's got the bigger brain, he's got the use of his hands, he's got a thumb, and because of these extra benefits, which he was just lucky, to be honest, because it was a chance mutation, he has now climbed up the food chain, if you can call it that, and he now sits as the king of the world. This wasn't something that was given to him. He wasn't created. The world wasn't created for him. The animals weren't created for him. The land wasn't created for him. The seas weren't created for him. Neither was the oceans or the sun or the stars or the moon. Not at all. She came about by chance, and as a result, they have now become the top of the pile. So in order to say, does this tie in with Islamic principles? Does this tie in with Islam, that the human, because our focus is going to be pretty much on the human, is also, because we've really dealt with the science part of the common descent and also the random mutations and the natural selection. We've dealt with that in great detail, and if you're not sure, I would advise you to go back to part 1 if you've got to this stage and you're still sort of scratching your head. We've dealt with the science behind it, and we've being categorically clear. Again, I will also say that I'm not going into great detail in these two presentations because they are for the general masses, and it's already quite challenging in places. If I was to then start using technical terms and start giving you technical details, both in biochemistry and things of that nature, it will be a little bit of a switch off. So it's just, let's keep it general. So we have numerous verses in the Quran, and I've only recorded some in which we see quite a different ideology. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ألم ترى أن الله سخر لكم ما في الأرض والفلك تجري في البحر بأمره ويمسك السماء أن تقع على الأرض إلا بإذنه إن الله بالناس لرؤوف رحيم. So do you not see that indeed Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sakhara, subjugated for you, subjugated for you that which is in the earth, والفلك, and also gave you the power and authority over ships which flow upon the oceans, بأمره. So here you can see from that term there clearly that it's not that the human is also a chance product like any other creature, and it just so happens that he's got the bigger brain and he's the fittest of the lot, and as a result, because he's the fittest of the lot, he's reached the top of the pile. No, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself is saying that these creatures and everything around you has been subjugated for you. Ma means everything which is upon the earth. Furthermore, we have Alam taraw anna Allah sakhara lakum ma fi samawati ma fil ard. That do you not see that indeed Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has subjugated for you that which is in the heavens and that which is in the earth. Meaning again that you are a special creature, that you've been created and all other things have been created for you. Not to abuse, not to take advantage of, but to utilize. And obviously ensure that you replace, so you don't abuse. And you're utilizing them in order to survive and in order to express your thanks to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the creator, for giving you the gifts he's given you. وَإِذْ قَالَ رَبُّكَ لِلْمَلَائِكَةِ, and when your Rabb said to the angels, إِنِّي جَائِلٌ فِي الْأَرْضِ خَلِيفَةً, indeed I'm going to make upon the earth a Khalifa, a vice regent, somebody who is going to be put in charge of the earth, somebody who is going to deal with the day-to-day and resolve issues upon the earth, both amongst the humans and also to ensure that the rest of the creatures are looked after, that the creatures of the oceans are looked after, that the creatures of the sky are looked after, that the plants are looked after, the rainforests are looked after, the rivers are looked after, the seas are looked after, the Arctic Circle is looked after, the ozone layer is looked after, the ensuring the glaciers are not melting, and if they are, who's the cause of them? That's his purpose, Khalifa. And we have more. وَإِذْ قَالَ رَبُّكَ لِلْمَلَائِكَةِ إِنِّي جَاعِلٌ فِي الْأَرْضِ خَلِيفَةً قالوا, in fact, it's the same one I've repeated twice, apologies. هُوَ الَّذِي خَلَقَ لَكُم مَا فِي الْأَرْضِ جَمِيعًا, and he is that being that created for you that which is on the earth, everything, meaning everything upon the earth has been created for your service. Okay, it's for your service. Either it fits in some food chain somewhere, or it keeps some other habitat balance, or it's a direct, so it's either indirectly of benefit to you or a direct benefit to you. And all these creatures exist in order to maintain the earth for what it is and how it will continue, because it's a fine balance, is the earth. الذي جعل لكم الأرض فراشا والسماء بناء وأنزل من السماء ماء فأخرج به من الثمرات رزقا لكم فلا تجعلوا لله أندادا وأنتم تعلمون. And he is that being that created for you the earth as a resting place, as a surface, and created the skies as a canopy. So again, the earth and the skies have been created for man, so that the man could live on earth. So again, there is a clear direction, a clear aim, and a clear intention, which clearly is putting man, human, as a special creature that hasn't come about by chance, but has actually been created, and the rest of the earth has been provided for him or for her to utilize. And we have more. هُوَ الَّذِي أَنزَلَ مِنَ السَّمَاءِ مَاءً لَكُمْ. He is that being that sends the rains down from the skies for you. From there, sharab, you can have something to drink. وَمِنْهُ شَجَرٌ وَفِيهِ تُسِيمُونَ. So here again, we can see that the earth and everything it provides is a means for the human to utilize in order to express thanks to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. والله جعل لكم من بيوتكم سكنا وجعل لكم من جلود الأنعام بيوتا تستخفونها يوم ذعنكم ويوم إقامتكم ومن أطوافها وأوبارها وأشعارها أثاثا ومتاعا إلى حين. And here again, Allah subhanahu has created for you your homes to rest in, what is made for you from the skins of animals. Homes. Okay. So he has made for you, for the skins of animals, homes. So not only is the skins of animals useful, obviously, to the animal, but it's also there growing so that humans can use it. Humans can take benefit from it. And also from its wool, hair, and its fur, you can make dress out of it, or furnishings, or material which you can use around in the house. And this is a provision for a while. So not only does the hair, the fur, and what else keep the animal warm and protect the animal, but it's also something which the human can then use once he removes it from the animal. So again, double use. One is to keep the animal alive, and obviously keeps it in cold places, it can survive, but also the humans can take benefit. You are clearly seeing a completely different narrative in the Quran with respect to the human as a chance mutant. Clearly not. So let's now explore the area of adaptation and speciation. Okay, adaptation argues that a creature's habitat means that the species adapts to the surroundings. So we had obviously the finches that Charles Darwin saw in the Galapagos Islands, how each creature's beak, each bird's beak changed due to the food that was available to it. That's how he perceived it. He thought the change happened. Okay. And speciation is that there's a population which splits into two, separates from one another, and then develops differently, and it becomes a subspecies, because in some cases then they can't produce an offspring if the two were to mate, even though it's assumed that the two were originally together. But this, as I've explained in part 1, and here is just as a little reminder for us, that this is just a build-up of tolerance, or the natural variation that we have, the distribution within a population. And you will get birds with various size beaks, which is going to be, and we've labeled them as a finch, but there could have been, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala could have created a finch-like creature with all sorts of different beaks. It's not beyond him. And it's just that when they're all together, we don't notice the difference. But when these birds separate, and the food source which is readily available is of a particular type which benefits a bird which has a longer beak, say, then the birds with the smaller beaks, either they will have to fly on and go somewhere else, which they possibly do, and start living in areas where there's other birds with smaller beaks, because that's only the food source there, or they die out there, because there's no food available. So the only birds which are available are the long beak ones. So we mistaken that to think that, oh, this creature has adapted to its surroundings, when really it's the only creature which can survive in those surroundings. Like we saw with the industrial melanism, where we thought, or rather some people thought, that the moth had changed from white to black due to its survival in the Industrial Revolution and not being picked out from trees around the north west. But that wasn't true. It was only because the white moths were being eaten, and the only one which survived was the black moth. So these are, let's just call them subspecies, because don't forget, we are grading and putting creatures in boxes after Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has not given us a list of these are all the things I've created, these are all the types of birds. This is, we're observing, and it's our observation which is telling us that this has happened, when in reality all it is that there's this variety which naturally exists. So let's call it subspecies. There's this natural variety which exists within the birds anyway. So really no change is taking place. This is the argument that's being made. There's no adaptation going on, no speciation going on. It's a normal distribution amongst the species. The surroundings change, and those who are best suited to those surroundings live, and those who aren't best suited either go somewhere else, or they die, or they reduce in number and therefore not detected. So for instance, we have here the honey creepers of Hawaii, which you can find on the good old BBC website, and I've kept it fairly simple. So this, I think, is a sort of GCSE level. You can click on that and it'll take you there, but I've been kind enough to borrow that there, an image which you can find on that particular website. And you can see that the bird, which was described as the same bird, a honey creeper, but they had separated itself. It had, each species, each population area lived separately, and we found that the beak changed. As we look at it from the evolution perspective, the beak changed, it adapted because of the surrounding itself it found itself in. However, what's to say, or this is the argument that I'm making, that all you had lots of birds, all with various beak sizes, okay, all flying off to a particular area. But in this particular area, there were lots of insects. Okay, so this poor bird didn't really survive, this one didn't survive, this one didn't survive. So either they flew off, or they decided to stay there and die out, because the only food, or a large amount of food available was insects. This one survived, so this one became the major population. So you couldn't really see that many of these. So people thought, now this bird has adapted and is now become, its beak is of this size. Similarly, in another area of in Hawaii, you find there's lots of seeds. There's still some fruit and still some nectar and still some insects, but there's lots of seeds. So what type of beak are you going to see in that area? Obviously, you're going to see that type of beak in that area. Why? Because these birds will be low in number, or either they will be low in number because the others have flown off, because the fruit bird's thinking, hold on a second, there ain't no fruit here, so I ain't hanging about here too long. I'm flying off and see if I can find some more fruit, and it disappears. Or there's small amount of fruit which all the birds are fighting over, so clearly some of the fruit eating birds are going to die and some will survive. So this percentage becomes so low that it's now markedly low, that you're only seeing these sorts of birds on a regular basis. So it's looked as though, look, in that area there were birds with beaks like this, and this area they've adapted and they've got beaks like this. So here we are. It's a single species of a finch-like bird. The populations become isolated. The beaks were different. This is the argument for speciation and evolution. However, it's simple. These birds who could access food lived, those that could not died. Some species think like bird, or as I've explained to you, their numbers went so small that it wasn't measurable anymore, or they just decided to fly off and go somewhere where they can get better food, because clearly getting food from this place wasn't really working for them. So let's go back to Allah's use of evolution. Now, there is within the Christian circles definitely a view now, because you see, the problem that we have is that, and this is why evolution sticks, is because the majority of the Western world only have the Bible to draw comparison with when it comes to the creationist attitude towards. And what we were looking at is the book of Genesis, and in Genesis it talks about a small period of time and how creatures came about and what happened. But we already know, as we've already discussed in atheism, that the Bible was and the Old Testament and was being written several decades, if not centuries, after the actual prophet who brought the message had passed away or left the earth. That was going on. Secondly, we know from the Quran that these texts were then modified, changed. So we don't know the accuracy of them anymore. So when people in the West, they have two options. One is to accept the biblical version, which is in Genesis, accept that version, or they accept evolution. And it's kind of, and I don't want to use the word lesser of the two evils because it doesn't sound right in that context, but it's the lesser of the two, or it's the easier to believe to be correct, once I get my words right. Okay, but they're not looking at what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has said. Now this has now moved on to some Muslims as well, and even to some Muslim sort of scholars who are now saying that no, evolution could have been the process which Allah used to create. So he could have created a creature which then evolved eventually to become man. What's wrong with that? Why can't that happen? There's no Quranic verse sort of going against that. And when it's science, we can sort of reach that conclusion. Well, let's progress this idea, this thesis for some while. So, but it's slightly modified because obviously evolution theory in its real form, it does not accept a God, does not accept a creator. So in place of natural selection and random mutation, they have replaced Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, meaning God made a common ancestor, Allah made a common ancestor, and then through his selection, and through his changes, so they're not random and they're not natural, then evolution took place. So that's the argument that's being put forward. The question comes up, why? Why would this be a process which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would adopt when he speaks clearly about various creatures that have been created? And it seems a strange process to develop. But that aside, that's just a simple question. Let's look at it from a scientific perspective. There's no evidence to adopt this in the fossil record. So the empirical evidence is not there. We do not find any intermediary. We do not find any in between at all. And as what we've seen before, we now have to accept punctuated equilibrium, whereby we're not seeing changes take place for long periods of time, and then over a relatively short period of time, we're suddenly seeing a new species, so a quick development. So it's as though a species existed, it was extinct, and a new species arrived on the scene. Nothing as different as that. And even when we look at it rationally, it does not make sense rationally when we're trying to explore the fact of how these mutations can take place and the probability, which, to be honest, we've explained in great detail in part 1. So there's nothing supporting this thesis. And I guess the even trickier part is the evolution of humans, which, as I said, is rarely entered into because it's kept out of there, because it will lead you to a conclusion. And I've already given you my disclaimer at the beginning of the set of slides, and I want to mention it again. And that disclaimer here is that there will be some slides, which are not my slides, which I will be using, in which the language I feel is inappropriate. But the language is brought to show that if we accept evolution, even if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is using evolution, then we have to accept it in humans as well. Now you do see this nice picture which is given, which is evolution of the skull, and we have Australopithecus, and then we go to Homo erectus, and then Homo sapiens and Neanderthal man or Neanderthalensis, and we have the Homo sapien, which is supposedly now the modern man. Now we get this nice linear progression. We can see the cranium size getting bigger, okay? Even though it's shown that Neanderthal man had slightly bigger space, but as you can see, the cranium space, which is obviously reflecting on the size of the brain, is giving the impression that it's getting bigger. So we're getting smarter, okay? Why we are? Allahu Alam. What is also happening is our face is changing. We're going away from this kind of a face which sticks out with a sticking out sort of bridge of the nose area and a chin and with a huge jaw, okay, with a huge jaw and small eyes, you know, at the top with the, and then as you see, we go across, we see that the jaw is getting smaller, okay, and the lip is coming back. And you can see the face getting flatter. And then you see again in Homo sapien man, the jaw's getting even smaller. Still maybe not a big change between the two here, to be honest. And you're seeing here the face is definitely getting flatter because you're losing that kind of jutting out jaw. And it's getting much flatter now until we reach to good old modern man who's now got a straightforward face, a distinctive chin that's come about. And obviously the eyeball area looks much bigger, relatively speaking. And that's a nice linear line they want to show and say, look, there you go. Evolution of the skull. The skull is changing. Really. Here, let's see some more. So we got Homo, and I'm sorry about this, but you're going to see lots of skulls and craniums. So if you're one who gets sort of put off these sorts of things, you know, you might want to just listen and not watch. But you know, there will be some slides which are coming up now, which again are slides which, you know, may be slightly offensive. They may be, never mind slightly offensive, they will be offensive rather. My apologies, and that people will find them. Some people may find them. And they're not there to offend anybody. They're there to stress make this point that's going to happen. So here we go. We've got the chappie again, which is an earlier cranium, and then we got Homo erectus, which is a later one, until we reach the Homo sapien, which is where we are now supposedly. And you've got these various skulls. So it seems there's a progression. You know, You know, skull is changing slightly. I don't know why I did the do bit. But here we are. Let's see some skulls. Now, hopefully, don't look at the small writing, but you will think, hold on, these skulls are different. Okay. You've got, for example, you've got a difference in the cranium. Okay. You've got a definite difference in the jaw. Right. And even more distinct here. Okay. You've got more distinct here. You know, look at this part here of the cranium and look at this part here of the cranium and look at here. And look at here, okay? So you're beginning to see that, hold on, you know, there's different craniums depending on one's ethnicity. So this is a female African American, this is a female Asian, and this is a female European, and this is a human male African. So you can see the African head is looking very different. In fact, you know, if you compare to some of the so-called older skulls, it looks more similar to that, okay? But we'll see more examples. Here, if you can see clearly, we've got the Caucasoid, okay? Those who are from the Caucasus. So you can see this is a frontal view of the skull and this is a side view of the skull. But when you look at the Mongoloid skull, okay, it's very different. It's very flat on the front, okay? Even more flatter than the Caucasoid. And it's very flat at the back, okay? But then when you look at the Capoid, you're seeing what is supposedly put forward as a skull of an earlier man. Now look at this, that is distinctly different than that. Clearly, anyone can see that they're two different. Now, if somebody digs this up and dates it wrong, they could quite easily say, oh, here we have Neanderthal man, or we have such and such man, or we have such and such man. And they can make these kind of statements and give the impression that they found a different type of human. But are they really finding a different type of human? Or are they finding, as I've been arguing all along, are they actually finding basically a species, a different type of human, like we're seeing here? You know, we could, if we're going to use the word subspecies, then these are all humans, okay? But it gets even more interesting because when we get down to the Congoid, okay, it's again a very different skull structure, and even more so when we get to the Australoid, the Aboriginal skull, and you can distinctively see with the Aboriginal skull, this looks like an older skull. There's more. So look at these two. Now, maybe I should have concealed that part, but if you looked at these two skulls, you would say, oh, that's an older skull of probably Neanderthal man, or probably somebody even before Neanderthal man, maybe 100,000, 200,000 years ago, and this is a modern skull. You would be wrong. This is an Aboriginal skull of humans which are alive today. And this is a Caucasian skull of basically humans alive today, but from the Caucasoid. Okay, very different. Does that mean that, God forbid, and this is not what I'm saying, this is what people did say, you know, in this justified a lot of killing, is that, you know what, these are a backward race, they're not fully evolved. You would have to say that, because we've seen that these type of skulls are in the evolution sphere, according to evolutionists, an earlier human, they've called them. Could there not just be different tribes? Could there not just be different tribes of people, different races of people? Could there not have been that have been wiped out by killing? Could there not have been that? Or wiped out by Allah because they were punished for something? Could that not be the case, that they were completely wiped out as a people? And if we think, nah, how can people get wiped out? Really? Are we going to say that? Let's see some more slides. Okay, here we got another version now. So this is a Caucasoid. Same ones again, looking, and the reason why I'm giving many versions of it is I don't want to draw, like you see nowadays here, one fossil gets dug up. And from one fossil, never mind telling you that the whole people look like this. Okay, so we're not showing the comparison how fossils are different, so that every single person was like this. And also, never mind that, we can tell you what skin color he had, or she had, what their face looked like, what their hair was, all from that fragment of a skull. Now, you are looking at skulls of humans on Earth right now, and that skull just looks distinctively different than this skull, which looks distinctively different than this skull. Do they mean here now, God forbid, that this is an earlier human and this is a later human and this is the perfect evolved human? Is that what it's saying? And again, here's another view, the Mongoloid, the Negroid, and the Caucasoid. Okay, again, terms I'm not using. These are terms which are used by evolutionists. And again, the European, the African, and the Asian, distinctively different. And then we have this chart in which we have the Arctic liver, the Mongol, okay, the European, and the American. These are the words it's using. So again, no offense intended, my apologies. It refers to it as the, I will use the black man, okay, and also the Hottentot, which is again term used. I think they were an African race living in, I think southwestern part of the Africa, if I'm not mistaken. The Khoikhoi peoples. They were called that by the white Europeans. So yes, Southwest Africa. And then you've got the Malay, and then you've got the Australian. Now, if you look at these skulls, okay, they are very different. Very different. Okay. So when we saw those skulls earlier, and then we were given these nice names of Homo erectus and and when we get these various other names, and there's some other names that I have as well, which were given to these individuals, was that really the case, or was this something which was just added afterwards? You know, we've got, for example, Homo habilis, one type of human that's given that name. Another one is Homo heidelbergensis, Homo rudolfensis, and Homo floresiensis, and Homo erectus, which we know of, Homo neanderthals, which we know of, which are more recent, as is referred to, and Homo sapiens, which is supposedly the ancestor of modern humans. But we're seeing a distinct difference. So if there was something wrong with our measuring system, and that's a different thing altogether in terms of how do we date things that we dig up. That's a whole lecture in itself. Now, if there is something, and that's not, wahi or something, that's not revelation. If there was something wrong with our dating system, then people could, if we were to line these up in a so-called evolutionary progression, where the ethnic groups would be lined up and where the white groups would be lined up. It would be as though some people were less evolved than others, and that gave justification. And we have here, so this is the misreading of schools and the human intelligence and scientific racism. Now, science can't be racist, but when people start to think that humans evolved and they moved from an ape-like creature, remember this is something that was put together in 1856, Types of Mankind by Knott and Glidden. And when we had the ape skull, and we're going from the ape skull past the black man's skull towards the so-called Greek skull, and the Greeks were held in high respect, is explaining that this is a process of evolution, meaning that some humans were not fully evolved. That is only if you accept the evolution theory. If you don't accept the evolution theory, if as Muslims we see, and we'll see if there's any evidence for that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created everybody differently. And that does not mean just because somebody's cranium is like this or their jawbone is like this, it means that they're less evolved. Absolute nonsense. Absolute nonsense. And that's another one which is again explaining. And again, this is the sadness that you saw, is comparing a white man with a black man and drawing similarities with a orangutan to say that this was the situation. So this is the type of racism then which started to develop. So just jumped a slide there. So did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala use evolution to create? Well, what I've just described to you there, will I'm sure send a shiver down your back and make you think that I don't think that is the case. But let's see anyway. Sorry, I'm jumped. What's going on? Oh, I've done this twice now, is when my mouse is stuck there. I keep clicking. So let's go to there. Okay. Now, there's two possibilities of where Adam alayhi salatu wasalam and Hawa alayhi salatu wasalam, Adam and Eve, would come in this. Now, they're being described as the first humans. Now, those who say Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses evolution to create, where does Adam and Hawa alayhi salatu wasalam, Adam and Hawa alayhi salam, come in this? Now, if they were the first creatures if they were the common ancestor, okay, I'm just putting two hypothetical cases forward. This is not what I agree with. If they were the original descent, the original ancestors, then by evolution theory itself, then they would, na'udhu billah min zalik, have to be some kind of creature which was an ape-like creature from which apes, gorillas, humans, and all other species of that nature evolved from. Allah, astaghfirullah. Anybody accepts that, then that's a very serious misunderstanding of their religion. Okay, but what if they were the first modern human, Homo sapien? What if they were the first modern human and they were the start of the first modern human? Well, that doesn't make sense either. Why? Well, because if there was this common ancestor, it would obviously produce offspring, and the offspring would produce offspring, and then there would be offspring, and until eventually you would have at least several 100,000 human-like creatures on the surface of the earth. Remember, I'm going with this evolution theory, not with the theory that there were different types of people that lived on the surface of the earth with different craniums and different bodies, but they were human. Okay, they were human like you and I. There was nothing wrong with them. They were not backwards, or they were not fully evolved and all that nonsense. Because if you take that, then God forbid you'd have to take that now with the people on the surface of the earth right now, and then you would have to buy into the racist ideology of thinking that other humans that have similar craniums and similar skeletal structures as those so-called people of the past are also not fully evolved. And that's a very serious racist position to adopt. Anyway, let's go back to this. So once we got to the modern human, there would be several 100,000 at least of these modern human who then, of the Homo sapien, that gave birth to the modern human. Well, that doesn't mean that there were two people. Okay, so that doesn't time. So there cannot be the start of the Homo sapiens, as there would have been much more than two. That's the point I'm trying to make. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes it quite clear. He says, I don't know why my Siri woke up then. He says, he makes it quite clear. He says, Ya ayyuhalladhina. Sorry, let me just get that. He says, not Ya ayyuhalladhina. Ya ayyuhan nas, O mankind. Ittaqu rabbakum alladhi khalaqakum min nafsin wahida. Fear that Rabb that created you from one nafs, one soul. Wa khalaqa minha, or one entity. Wa khalaqa minha zawjaha, and then made his partner from it. وَبَثَّ مِنْهُمَا, and then he spread from them too. رِجَالًا كَثِيرًا وَنِسَاءً, and many men and many women. وَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ الَّذِي تَسَاءَلُونَ بِهِ وَالْأَرْحَامِ, and then obviously it goes into a different topic altogether. But the point that I'm trying to make here rather is that there was originally a man and a woman from which all men and women came. Now the question comes, when was this man and a woman? Was this man and a woman at the original common ancestor? If so, astaghfirullah, God forbid, there would have to be some kind of ape-like creature. If it wasn't, if it was at the start of Homo sapiens, well, there cannot be two, because there was several 100,000, if not a million Homo sapiens, which would mean obviously that doesn't make sense when Allah SWT speaks of two people. So it doesn't tie in. There's another verse as well, or two verses rather, in Surah Sad. إِذْ قَالَ رَبُّكَ لِلْمَلَائِكَةِ إِنِّي خَالِقٌ بَشَرًا مِنْ طِينٍ, that I'm going to create a human from clay. فَإِذَا سَوَّيْتُهُ, when I form him, وَنَفَخْتُ فِيهِ مِنْ رُوحِي, and I blow into him his spirit, فَقَعُوا لَهُ, and fall for him in a state of prostration. So at what point was this? Again, was it at the point of this common ancestor, which we can't accept, because Allah SWT clearly described it as sawaitu, formed him perfectly, and blew in him his soul. Blew him in his soul would mean he would be a human. He would be accountable to Allah. He would have to avoid committing sins, and therefore he is the first man. He is the first human. He is to abide by Sharia. So therefore, how can it be this common ancestor? Na'udhu billah min zalik. And it can't be two when the Homo sapiens are now literally the last living human on the surface of the earth. So what is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's creation? Well, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَمِنْ آيَاتِهِ خَلْقُ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ وَاخْتِلَافُ أَلْسِنَتِكُمْ وَأَلْوَانِكُمْ إِنَّ فِي ذَلِكَ لَآيَةٍ لِلْعَالَمِينَ. That indeed from the signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the creation of the heavens and the earth, and the differences in your tongues and in your colors. So this is a creation of Allah. So when we see that some of us are white, some of us are brown, some of us are black, some of us are Mongoloid, some of us are Malay, some of us are from wherever we are, we will see differences not only in our skins. Now, the only reason why Allah is mentioning the skins, or as my understanding of it is, mentioning the skins in the language, because these are the only which is apparent. Nobody was actually comparing craniums in those days. Nobody was actually comparing the sort of physical makeup or the genetic makeup of individuals in those days. They were comparing their parent. And Allah is saying that there is a difference in you. And this is just normal creation of humans. That does not mean that some humans are more evolved than others. Nonsense. They have been created in their complete, perfect state. But it's just made them differently. They have different traits. They have different qualities. Some are good at this, but they're not so good at that. Some are good at that, but not so good at this. And that's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's way. So the difference is not due to evolution. So that, what we see on the surface of the earth is not due to evolution, but is due to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's creation. And some humans are not subhuman or partway through evolution. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created them like that. But when you are a white person in the 19th century, then the evolution theory actually supports you in a big way. Why? Because it allows you to colonize and attack and consider other races and people to be savages or not evolved. So this gave the license to people to go across into the New World, into the Americas, and absolutely destroy anybody that came in their way. Go into Africa and absolutely destroy anyone that came in their way. Go into Australia and absolutely destroy anybody who came in that way. So it gave them the scientific justification, because the religion would say you can't do this because they are human. But the science, again, this wasn't science, it was their misunderstanding of science, or what they wanted to read into the science as they pleased, gave them the impression that, hold on, these are not fully formed humans, they haven't evolved properly, so they're actually not reached the perfect state, and as a result we can destroy them. We saw a similar exercise within the eugenic system of Germany, Nazi Germany, in which they also were of the view that, to make this to make this superhuman would have to be developed from their own race, and you would have to remove, and they would only allow a particular man and a particular woman to marry and have children in order to perfect and evolve and make the perfect human. And this was their particular, and this is all due to this misunderstanding of so-called science, when it's not science, it's pseudoscience at best, in trying to understand the world around them. So what is the aim of evolutionists? Well, before we finish off, this needs to be quite clear. The aim of evolutionists is simple, is to replace Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They've made it categorically clear. The common ancestor, natural selection, random mutation, it's clear to see. By replacing Allah, they also then want to replace the accountability from the human. The human is just a random mutant. It's a chance creature which came about not with some divine purpose or some divine responsibility, but rather just some perchance number of mutations, spin of the dice, and he came about, she came about, which means you can do as you please and you are no different than an animal. So you can live like an animal and do as you please. There is this life and then death with nothing after, because that has to be clearly the aim then of an evolutionist, is that we are just an organic species by chance and we will eventually die and it will be over. Now, obviously, if we consider evolution as a means to explain Allah's creation, then this has serious belief repercussions with respect to a prophet and his wife, as I've explained in great detail earlier. And not only that, by entertaining this theory, we could be Trojaning horse something into our belief system, which would also be seriously problematic. On that point, let me reach a conclusion. Evolution is a lie, okay? That's been said before. When you looked in the atheism two-part series, you saw quite clearly that the atheist lied about the view of atheism and of the way science is used. So evolution is being used to push a particular. Now, when you say evolution is a lie, people then think, oh, well, you think then that what happened in the Bible is what happened. That's not what we're saying. We don't know what's happened. We're trying to get an idea what's happened scientifically. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala hasn't explained in great detail, but what he has said is that he has created, and that things haven't come by chance, and things haven't mutated, and things haven't naturally been selected. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created them. That's something we have to accept, that Allah created, and there's accountability, and that's the right. So this is what we have to understand. As we saw when the new atheists were lying with respect to the point I made in the last slides. This is the so-called science behind replacing Allah, because it has to be science is the new religion. So in order to prove that science is the new religion, they have to, we shouldn't be anti-science, and Muslims aren't anti-science. I haven't got time to give you a lecture on the scientific contributions made by Muslims. So Islam has never told people not to be scientific. And again, if you watch the atheism series, you'll see that there's very much science is at the heart of what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala requests from us. And that brings to the end of the slideshow. So I hope I've been able to demonstrate in the two-part series about what our position should be with respect to evolution. Wa akhiru da'wana and alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
سبيل الدموع سبيل مريح تنهدى يا صاحي كي تستريح وبث الدعاء الخفي الصريح يسعك الفضل